In a world that thrives on noise, declarations, and grand gestures, we've come to overvalue the spoken word and undervalue the silent, unseen expressions of love. From films to music, from social media to everyday conversations, people are conditioned to expect love in the form of words. I love you. I miss you. I need you. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with speaking your heart, it becomes a shallow ritual when not anchored in presence and consistency. Words are easy, they cost nothing, but to show up truly and fully again and again, that is where the weight of love lives. Presence means more than physical proximity. A person can be beside you and yet 1,000 miles away in thought, intention, and attention. Presence is about full awareness. It's about the way someone listens without distraction, the way their eyes don't look past you but into you. When someone is truly present, you feel it. The moment becomes heavier, more alive. Time seems to slow down. You feel seen, heard, and safe, not because of what they said, but because of how they showed up. In contrast, think about how often people speak of love yet fail to be there when it matters. How often they promise forever in one breath and disappear the next. The illusion of love through language fades fast when action fails to support it. Anyone can promise, anyone can speak poetry, but only a few know how to stay, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. To stay when it's uncomfortable, to stay when it's boring, to stay when it requires selflessness and not gain. Consistency is the second pillar, and perhaps the one that gets tested the most in any relationship. Anyone can be wonderful for a day, a week, a season, but what about showing up during moments of silence? What about when there's nothing to gain, no reward, no recognition? True love reveals itself in repetition, in the small, consistent acts that seem invisible but build trust like bricks, stacking one atop another. The truth is, people don't remember every romantic phrase or dramatic gesture, but they do remember how someone made them feel, time and time again. They remember the person who brought them tea when they were sick without being asked, the one who stayed quiet and listened during their worst moments, the one who remembered the details that no one else bothered to care about. It is in these consistent, quiet, reliable moments that love embeds itself into memory. Children, for instance, learn to love not because their parents say, I love you, every day, though many do, but because of the way they are held, fed, protected, understood. Animals respond not to words but to presence. They know who gives them warmth, who feeds them, who walks beside them. Love that transcends language is more primal, more ancient, more real. In a similar way, deep romantic love is not a daily affirmation spoken into the air. It's a daily decision reflected in behavior, tone, energy, and rhythm. Presence and consistency also reveal what words often try to mask. A person can say, I love you, while cheating, manipulating, gaslighting, or betraying. Words can be distorted, but actions tell the truth in ways that cannot be rehearsed. There is no substitute for someone who shows up again and again, not because they have to, but because they choose to. The way they respond to your joy, to your pain, to your silence, that tells you everything you need to know. True love is quiet, not because it is unsure, but because it is stable. It doesn't need to convince. It doesn't need to prove. It simply is. And the person who loves with presence and consistency may not be the loudest in the room, but they are the most reliable. When they say, I'm here, they mean it. When they say nothing, they're still there. They don't disappear when things become difficult. They don't seek applause or validation. They aren't seasonal. They are steady. They are grounding. They become a place of rest in a chaotic world. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean always knowing what to say or never making mistakes. It means being committed to showing up, learning, trying, adjusting. It means holding space even when you're tired. It means saying less and doing more. It means making someone feel safe not just once, but often not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's not. Presence also means accepting that love isn't about controlling the other person or molding them into your ideal. It's about witnessing their growth, standing beside them in their becoming without imposing your will. Love rooted in presence allows freedom, it allows space, it watches without judgment and holds without tightening. And ironically, the more present you are, the more deeply the other person can relax. People stay where they feel most seen, most accepted, most understood, not where they hear the most promises. There's a reason why the relationships that last are often not the ones filled with constant declarations, but the ones where both people feel consistently held in the silence, in the unspoken, in the shared glance, in the day rituals that quietly say, "I choose you again." A love that endures is one that says, "I'm here." Not just today, not just when it's easy, but whenever it counts. And the only way to say that truly, undeniably, is through presence and consistency. In relationships, romantic, platonic, or professional, we often hear about the importance of trust. But trust is not something you demand. It is something that is earned over time. It is not built with promises alone, nor with passion, nor even with good intentions. One of the most powerful, yet often overlooked, foundations of trust is emotional discipline, the ability to regulate your reactions, to stay grounded in the face of conflict, and to respond rather than explode. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing how you feel. It does not mean becoming robotic or numb. In fact, it requires that you are deeply aware of what you're feeling: anger, jealousy, fear, sadness, and still choose to respond in a way that does not harm, accuse, or abandon. This awareness is strength. It is presence. And people naturally trust those who can remain anchored when emotional storms arise. In contrast, when someone constantly reacts without thinking, when their mood changes with every passing breeze, when they lash out, shut down, or emotionally manipulate, trust erodes. Not because they're necessarily bad, but because they become unpredictable, and unpredictability, when tied to emotional volatility, makes people feel unsafe. People will walk away not because they don't care, but because they no longer feel secure in the emotional environment you've created. Trust is built when someone knows how you will hold space for them, not just in moments of joy, but also in discomfort, miscommunication, and pain. Emotional discipline is what gives your partner, your friend, your colleague, the confidence to be open with you. They don't fear your reaction. They don't have to walk on eggshells. They don't second-guess whether being vulnerable with you will turn into a weapon used against them later. In that space of consistency and emotional safety, trust grows silently but powerfully. Discipline in emotions is not about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. It's about being aware of your triggers and not letting them control the narrative. You may feel jealousy rise in your chest or anger pulse behind your words, but emotional discipline allows you to pause, to breathe, to reflect before speaking. That pause is a skill. That silence filled with awareness is wisdom. And it's in that space between reaction and response where trust is either broken or built. The truth is, anyone can be kind when everything is going well. Anyone can be gentle when they are not challenged. But what about when you are hurt, when you are misunderstood, when someone fails to meet your expectations? That's where emotional discipline is truly tested. In the heat of emotion, will you accuse, insult, threaten, or withdraw? Or will you slow down, communicate clearly, and stay rooted in the relationship rather than the ego? Trust is reinforced every time you choose clarity over chaos, every time you speak rather than yell, every time you stay rather than run, every time you explain rather than assume. These may seem like small things, but they are acts of emotional discipline, And each one says to the other person, "You can count on me, even when I'm upset, even when I'm hurt, even when I'm struggling." Think about how comforting it is to be around someone who doesn't make their emotions everyone else's problem. Someone who doesn't guilt trip, explode, or punish with silence. Someone who knows how to process what they feel without projecting it onto others. That kind of person becomes magnetic, not because they are perfect, but because they are safe. That safety is what makes people open up, trust more deeply, and stay longer. Emotional discipline also helps you maintain dignity. In relationships, you will not always be in agreement. Tensions will rise, but how you behave in those moments defines your character more than anything you say when things are calm. Can you still be respectful in conflict? Can you still listen when you feel triggered? Can you still speak gently when your mind wants to go to war? These are the questions emotional maturity demands, and when the answer is yes, even just more often than not, trust becomes an unshakable bond. Another layer to this is emotional accountability, the ability to own your reactions, your tone, your contribution to the moment. When someone can say, "I overreacted," or "That was my fear talking," or "I need a moment to regulate myself before continuing this conversation," they immediately create trust, because they show that they are not led blindly by emotion, they are self-aware, they are responsible. They care enough to not damage what they value in the heat of the moment. People are more likely to forgive mistakes than they are to forgive repeated emotional volatility. Everyone slips up, but when someone continually blames their behavior on their feelings, "I was just mad," "I was in a bad mood," "I was stressed," it sends a signal. You are not safe with me unless I'm feeling good. And that kind of conditional safety cannot build long-term trust. When you have emotional discipline, you don't become immune to emotion. You simply stop letting it control your actions. You feel anger, but don't throw it like a weapon. You feel disappointment, but don't use it to shame. You feel fear, but don't manipulate with it. And over time, this internal regulation becomes something others can depend on. Children naturally trust parents who are emotionally stable. Partners naturally trust each other when conflict doesn't lead to emotional destruction. Teams naturally follow leaders who can stay level, headed under pressure. In all these dynamics, the thread is the same. Emotional discipline creates an atmosphere where others can relax, open, and engage because they don't fear being emotionally harmed. Trust is not just about loyalty or honesty, it's about safety. And nothing creates emotional safety more consistently than knowing the person in front of you will not use their emotions as weapons, will not collapse under stress, will not retreat into silent punishment or unpredictable fury. Emotional discipline is the quiet protector of every deep relationship. It is invisible but felt, unspoken but understood. In every human relationship, whether romantic, platonic, professional, or familial, there are visible expressions, smiles, compliments, conversations, acts of affection. These are the outer layers, but underneath all of it, holding the relationship upright like an unseen foundation, is respect. Without it, the structure begins to weaken. Without it, even love becomes fragile. And when respect disappears, connection follows soon after. Respect is not about agreeing with everything the other person says or does. It is not about blind obedience or polite tolerance. It is deeper than manners and far more enduring than temporary emotions. Respect is the acknowledgement of another person's worth, their space, their voice, their boundaries, their journey, their individuality. When you respect someone, you treat them not as an extension of yourself, but as a being who exists with their own story, their own pain, their own wisdom, their own path. That recognition is the first and most essential form of love. The mistake many people make is thinking that connection is sustained by constant closeness, constant communication, constant validation. But that's not true. Lasting connection comes from the ability to be close without suffocating, to be present without controlling, to be together without losing oneself. And this is only possible when respect is present. Respect allows space to exist between people, a space that is not filled with assumptions or projections, but with understanding. When a partner respects your boundaries, your silence doesn't feel like rejection. Your differences don't feel like conflict. Your growth doesn't feel like a threat. Respect turns space into trust, not distance. In romantic relationships, many people say they want love. But love without respect is dangerous. Love without respect can turn possessive, manipulative, even abusive. When someone says they love you but does not respect you, what they really love is how you make them feel, not who you are. Without respect, love becomes transactional. I'll care for you as long as you do what I want. I'll stay close as long as you behave how I expect. That is not love. That is control wearing a softer mask. To truly respect someone is to allow them the freedom to be themselves, even when it's inconvenient. It means accepting that they may have thoughts, feelings, perspectives, and behaviors that do not always align with your own. It means not trying to mold them into a version of yourself, but instead learning who they really are and honoring that truth. This is what makes connection sustainable, the sense that you can be your full self and still be held in high regard. There is also self-respect, which is just as vital. A person who lacks respect for themselves will often tolerate disrespect from others, or unconsciously disrespect others out of their own unresolved pain. Self-respect sets the tone for how we are treated. It determines the boundaries we enforce, the people we allow into our lives, and the standards we uphold in our interactions. When two people both carry deep self-respect and mutual respect, a relationship becomes a sacred space, not perfect, but strong, steady, capable of withstanding storms. Respect is also demonstrated in how we speak to one another. Tone matters, timing matters, intent matters. You can be right and still be disrespectful. You can speak the truth and still cause harm. Respect requires restraint. It requires you to pause before speaking, to ask yourself, is this helpful? Is this necessary? Is this kind? Not because you're afraid of conflict, but because you value the relationship more than winning the argument. Because you understand that words can either build connection or dismantle it. In moments of disagreement, respect reveals itself not in agreement, but in how we handle the tension. Can we disagree without demeaning? Can we listen even when we don't understand? Can we hold our ground without making the other person feel small? These questions are not just about communication, they are about character. And character is what makes someone trustworthy, not just in good times, but especially in hard ones. In family relationships, respect can often be overlooked because of familiarity. People grow used to one another. They stop saying please, stop saying thank you. They speak with assumptions, impatience, entitlement. But closeness is not an excuse for carelessness. In fact, the closer someone is to you, the more important respect becomes. Because you are in a position to hurt them more deeply and more silently. Respect is what prevents that. It is what keeps even lifelong connections warm, alive, mutual. In friendships, respect means not gossiping about each other. It means showing up when it's inconvenient, listening without fixing, celebrating without competition. It means not using someone's vulnerability as a way to feel powerful. It means remembering their stories, honoring their time, and recognizing when to speak and when to simply hold space. It is subtle, but it is powerful, and people feel it, not always in words, but in the energy that exists between you. In leadership, respect is even more crucial. A title doesn't guarantee it. Authority doesn't demand it. Respect must be earned. It is earned through fairness, through humility, through the ability to listen to feedback without ego, through the willingness to take responsibility when wrong. A respected leader doesn't have to shout to be heard. Their presence carries weight not because of fear, but because of consistency, clarity, and care. People trust those who respect them. They follow them not because they must, but because they want to. Respect is not loud. It does not draw attention to itself, but its absence is always felt. Disrespect can enter a relationship quietly, a condescending remark, a dismissive tone, a broken promise, a boundary ignored, and over time, it weakens the very fabric of connection. One thread at a time, until suddenly the closeness once shared feels strained, fragile, unsafe. When respect is lost, people begin to guard themselves. They stop opening up, they stop sharing. The connection doesn't end with a fight. It ends in silence, in distance, in disinterest. And yet, the beauty of respect is that it can be rebuilt. Slowly, intentionally, through actions that show care, through language that uplifts, through boundaries that are honored, through presence that does not demand but supports. It is in the consistency of small things, being on time, listening without interrupting, keeping your word, showing appreciation, that respect regrows like roots in soil that had once gone dry. We live in a world obsessed with the visible. What can be seen, measured, named, posted, and validated tends to dominate attention. People chase results, words, labels, and external symbols of control. But the greatest sources of strength are often the least seen. The most powerful forces in nature, gravity, magnetism, time, are all invisible. You cannot hold them in your hand, and yet their influence shapes everything. The same is true for the human spirit, for the quality of our relationships, for the nature of our inner life. True power is not loud. It is not always aggressive or obvious. It exists quietly in the unseen, within space, within silence, and within energy. Space, in its simplest form, is emptiness. And yet, in every art form, space is what gives form meaning. In music, it is the pause between the notes that creates rhythm. In architecture, it is the open room that gives breath to the structure. In conversation, it is the pause between words that allows them to land. Most people fear space. In relationships, they rush to fill it with noise, reassurance, or explanation. In life, they rush to fill it with plans, distractions, and things. But space is not the absence of meaning. It is the container for meaning. It is what allows perspective to grow, emotion to settle, and clarity to emerge. To hold space for another human being is one of the most powerful acts of care. It means you do not rush to fix or explain. You do not interrupt their pain with your discomfort. You do not take their silence personally. You simply remain present. Space in this sense is not distance. It is presence without intrusion. It is the opposite of control. It is a kind of sacred permission for someone to exist exactly as they are, without being edited, evaluated, or rushed into becoming something more palatable. Holding space also applies to the self. Giving yourself room to be unsure, to rest, to feel, to be still. This is not weakness, but strength. It is in the empty moments that you meet the parts of yourself that stay hidden in noise. People often avoid silence not because they dislike it, but because it reveals too much. It removes the distractions that keep them numb, but it is in that discomfort that transformation begins. Only when you are still can you see where you are. Only when you stop speaking can you hear what your soul is trying to say. Silence is another form of invisible power. In conversations, people tend to mistake volume for influence. They believe that whoever talks the most or the loudest wins. But real wisdom does not always speak. Silence, when held with presence, becomes a kind of gravity. It draws people in. It causes them to listen. It allows the truth to surface. Silence is not a void. It is a field. Within it, insight grows, emotions settle. Respect deepens. There is a kind of silence that is heavy with truth, one that says more than any string of sentences ever could. In conflict, silence can be an anchor, not the kind that shuts down communication, but the kind that holds back destructive reaction. When you can sit in silence and feel your emotions without acting them out, you are no longer ruled by them. This is emotional strength at its highest. Not silence as punishment, but silence as containment. When you are grounded enough to stay silent until you are clear, your words become sharper, cleaner, more impactful when you do choose to speak. Then there is energy, the most subtle and yet unmistakable form of power. Energy cannot be seen, but it is always felt. It is the unspoken current between people. It is the vibe of a room when someone enters it. It is the tension before a conversation, the warmth in someone's presence, the calm in another's gaze. People may not always remember what you said, but they always remember how you made them feel. That feeling is your energy speaking louder than your words ever could. Energy is your alignment. It is the result of how your mind, body, and spirit are oriented in a moment. When you are in conflict with yourself, saying one thing, thinking another, feeling something else entirely, your energy is fragmented. People sense that. They may not understand it consciously, but they feel the dissonance. When you are in alignment, honest in thought, clear in feeling, authentic in expression, your energy becomes whole. It becomes magnetic. You no longer have to chase approval because people feel drawn to what is real. Energetic power is also about containment, not leaking your energy everywhere, not reacting to every provocation, not giving your attention to what does not nourish you. There is strength in being selective, in choosing stillness over reaction, solitude over codependence, internal peace over external noise. This is not indifference, it is mastery. When you can sit with yourself in silence, when you can hold your own space, when your energy does not rise and fall with every external event, you become unshakable. Not cold, not distant, just grounded. The invisible is where everything begins. Before the tree, there is the root. Before the sunrise, there is the quiet night. Before the transformation, there is stillness. Most people overlook these stages because they don't offer immediate results or external proof. But this is where real power lives, in the space you create around others, in the silence you cultivate within yourself, in the energy you bring into every room, every word, every touch.